Welcome to Hill Center at the Old Naval Hospital. The program will begin here with an overview of this fascinating building, followed by a tour. Here you see the building from the east with the front porch to the left. This porch is the main building entrance, facing south to the Navy Yard and the Marine Barracks. And here is the building as seen from the north, showing the secondary portico looking out on Pennsylvania Avenue with the ornamental vents and carriage house designed by architect Ammi B. Young. When the hospital was built, Pennsylvania Avenue was unpaved, leading to a ferry crossing on the Anacostia River. The Washington Naval Hospital was authorized by Congress in March 1864 and approved by President Lincoln. Construction was underway by the end of the year. We don't know the name of the original architect, but we have detailed records that prominent architect Ammi B. Young completed the design and was the construction supervisor. Young came to Washington in 1852 as supervising architect of the Treasury. He formulated the design for federal custom houses and courthouses, symmetrical, built of brick or stone with fine classicizing or Renaissance details to suggest the new nation's Republican roots. Here you see the Georgetown Post Office, which he designed. Construction of the hospital under Young's supervision lasted roughly 2 years. It welcomed its first patient on October 1st, 1866, after the war had ended. This 1870 photograph is the first known image of the completed building. This is the admitting ticket for Benjamin Drummond, the first patient to enter the hospital on October 1st, 1866, and you'll see the list of the patient's clothing. Seaman Drummond, an African-American enlisted early in the war, was captured by the Confederate Navy and escaped to return to active duty. During the Civil War, service in the Union Navy was integrated, and Drummond served with white seamen as well as African Americans. All evidence suggests the Naval Hospital was also integrated. During the Civil War, the city of Washington was filled with thousands of battle casualties in temporary hospitals, essentially tent cities. Here is one of the largest, Lincoln Hospital, located close to the modern-day Lincoln Park. And this is a ward in Armory Square Hospital, which was located on the Mall. Poet and nurse Walt Whitman helped treat wounded soldiers here. This temporary ward is quite different from the rooms in this hospital, as you'll see during our tour. Let's look back to earlier events to illustrate why a naval hospital was needed. Here is an 1818 map showing the L'Enfant Plan of 1791 for Washington. You'll see that a large marine hospital already was on the plan. It's on the right along the Anacostia River. George Washington himself promoted the idea. Although a building wasn't built at the original site, interest in a permanent naval hospital never entirely disappeared. By 1812, America's first trained architect, Benjamin Henry Latrobe, was commissioned to prepare ambitious plans for a naval and marine hospital to be built a few blocks south of the Capitol building near present-day Garfield Park. Here you see Latrobe's plans. Unfortunately, these plans were completed just as the War of 1812 began, and of course in 1814 the British burned the Capitol and other public buildings. With so many needs, a naval hospital no longer seemed a priority, and Latrobe's plans were abandoned. This is a map from 1860 that shows the area around the United States Capitol and the Navy Yard. During the decades following the War of 1812, the sick were cared for in small temporary structures near the Navy Yard and Marine Barracks. This small structure, among others, was long associated with naval medicine. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, the patients were moved to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, the government hospital for the insane, as the need for a permanent solution became ever more urgent. The Civil War dramatically changed the city of Washington. Violent battles took place nearby, and the city soon was filled with the sick and wounded. Matthew Brady's photographs and Clara Barton's efforts to bring care to the wounded brought national attention to battlefield needs. In 1864, Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles proposed the plans for the Naval Hospital that were ultimately approved by Congress and President Lincoln. The Old Naval Hospital is closely linked, not only to the Civil War, but also this Capitol Hill neighborhood and the city of Washington. Rooms throughout the building honor personalities involved with this history, and we'll discuss them as we tour the building. Here is one of those figures, Frederick Douglass, American social reformer, orator, writer, and statesman, who after escaping from slavery became the leader of the abolitionist movement. During the Civil War, he met President Lincoln and afterward moved to a home only a few blocks away on Capitol Hill. The Pennsylvania Avenue portico is named in honor of him. When the Naval Hospital opened in 1866, the building incorporated the best elements of modern hospital design. The circulation of air was recognized as an important element of a healthy environment, and the hospital was built with high ceilings, large windows, and innovative brick flues to carry air from the basement to the upper floors. Its floor plan was laid out to maximize efficient use of space. Wards for officers and enlisted men were on the hospital's second floor. Rooms for nurses, the dispensary for medicines, and bathrooms were centrally located. The first floor held offices, the mess, and day rooms, and quarters for medical officers on duty. The kitchen, laundry, boiler room, and coal bunker and apothecary's quarters were in the basement, now the ground level. Here's a later photo of the building. You can see that by this time the streets of Washington had been graded, and the building was slightly elevated above street level as it is now. Within a few years, though, the building was already considered too small and outmoded. Eventually, in 1906, it was replaced by a new naval hospital at 23rd and E Streets Northwest, and eventually by Bethesda Naval Hospital. Even after the hospital functions were moved, the building was never entirely vacant. Between 1907 and 1911, it was used as the Navy Hospital Corps' training school. This is one of the graduating classes. Look closely. Do you see the cat? For decades, beginning in the 1920s, the building was used as a temporary home for veterans of all wars. Eventually, in the mid-1960s, it was turned over to the District of Columbia government for various uses. By the 21st century, the condition of the building had deteriorated. It turned to seed but stood its ground, according to Capitol Hill author Mary Z. Gray. As an example, here's a view of the fence before renovation. A private foundation was created to turn the hospital into Hill Center, with tremendous support from neighbors and friends. We'll talk about that rehabilitation process as you tour the building. Here are views of the fence during restoration in a Baltimore foundry. And here it is, restored and in place again, symbolically opening, welcoming new generations of visitors. And now, please join the docents for your tour of Hill Center at the Old Naval Hospital.